I'm joined now by Diane Swonk, chief economist at KPMG. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
So 528,000 jobs added in July. That's double what most economists expected. We've seen steady job growth in recent months, but was that number a surprise to you? And what does that tell you in a larger sense about the economy?
It certainly was a surprise, and that's great news if we can believe it. The household survey, which actually calls people up, has been much more stagnant over the last 4 months, and actually we're down from a peak earlier in the year. So that number is not quite as good, and so it tells us maybe this number might not be as good as it seems on first glance. That said, the 3.5% unemployment rate is also from the household survey. It fell in part because fewer people participated in the labor force, and that is somewhat worrisome. We should be seeing, with such a red-hot job market, for people to be putting their hat more in the ring rather than pulling out of the labor force. In the last 2 months, that's what we've seen instead.
Right, so maybe temper everybody's excitement here on this a little bit. We, of course, keep hearing also about a recession. It's constantly tossed around as growth has slowed. Inflation continues to hit Americans. Will inflation concerns continue now, even with this job growth?
That's exactly the problem, is that the high rate of churn, staffing shortages we see, long COVID, people out because of COVID, all of that is adding to costs, even though wages aren't keeping up with inflation. They're strong, but they're not keeping up with inflation, which makes a lot of people feel like we're in a recession. At the end of the day, this ups the ante on the Fed to keep going on rate hikes. And sadly, they think we need to see an increase in the unemployment rate in order to cool inflation enough to make it not metastasize and become a more chronic condition. That's an easy thing to talk about. It's a much harder thing to live through and have to actually act on.
Right, and so the Fed dealing with that tricky balance there of trying to slow down inflation without putting the brakes on growth and jobs. We've already seen some slowdown in the housing market as interest rates rise. What other sectors could see these job losses first if the economy slows or continues to slow?
Well, we think that we're not going to see a turn negative in employment until we get late in the year in early 2023, and then we think the unemployment rate's going to go up. That said, we've already started to see some of the warning signs out there. You know, large retailers announcing layoffs, some automakers announcing layoffs as they pivot more into electric vehicles. We've seen, many of the industries that did so well during the pandemic are now having to pull in a bit. Now, the good news is places that are really short-staffed, even as their business is cooled, like restaurants, we've seen actual contraction after adjusting for inflation, but they're still hiring up because they don't have enough staff to meet the demand they have. So, there is some opportunity there for some small businesses that are, really understaffed. That said, those businesses are taking it on the chin the most from the escalating costs that they're facing out there.
And escalating costs, like even in wage growth. I mean, what does that look like here? We did see growth in wages in July, but it really wasn't enough to keep up with the pace of inflation. So was there anything else in this jobs report that you think could also be an area of concern that might be overlooked right now?
Well, I think the most important issue is that, since the onset of the reopening and the recovery from the pandemic, we saw wages skyrocket. And there was a moment that we all got to sort of step in the sun and feel the warmth of actually glowing wages. And now we're getting burned by inflation. We've not only lost everything that we've gained in wages on average, but then some. And that's why most people are so upset, and you're seeing consumer attitudes really at these rock bottom lows, because they really do feel like they're losing ground even though they still have a job. Even defaults in low-income households have begun to pick up without an increase in unemployment. Another sign of stress in the labor market, we're back up to the highest levels of multiple job holders that we've had since February 2020. I see that as a defeat, not a strength in the job market, because it's a sign that people are stressed so much they have to now go back to multiple jobs just to make ends meet and cover their expenses from week to week.
Economist Diane Swonk, your perspective is incredibly important. Thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.